Hello everyone, welcome to today's teaching. We are now on lesson 2 of our IELTS series. Now today's lesson, we are going to zero in on speaking. Now IELTS speaking is very tricky. That's why a lot of students struggle to get their desired scores. So in this lesson, we are going to uncover a lot of things. So I know that you're excited. So let's get the ball rolling. IELTS speaking test consists of one-to-one interview with a special trained examiner. The interview is recorded and has 3 separate parts. This interview will last for approximately 11 to 14 minutes. So when you look at this, it is interview, but it's a bit different from job interview. That's why you really need to know what to do, because when you go for job interview, the settings is quite different. So in this series, we are going to uncover the 3 parts, the strategies to answer the part 1, 2, and 3. So IELTS speaking part 1. And before the part 1 questions start, there is a brief introduction. The examiner will introduce him or herself, and you will need to tell the examiner your name and show your identification such as passport or ID. The part 1 is not really difficult. The question will begin. This part of IELTS speaking test is the easiest part. The examiner will ask you general questions about yourself. Basically, you could tell about your name and a few things related to yourself. So the common topics are home, family, job, studies, interest, and a range of similar familiar topic area. The examiner will choose 3 topic areas, and you have about 4 questions on each. So you have around 10 to 14 questions depending on how long you speak for each. Some of the questions in part 1 include, I would just like to ask you some questions about your work. What job do you do? Why do you choose that particular job? What do you do every day? What other work would you consider doing? So if you look at these questions, they are very basic, which you have to just answer them straight away. IELTS speaking part 2. The IELTS speaking part 2, you have to talk on a topic that the examiner gives you for 2 minutes. It is designed to test your ability to speak for an extended period without hesitation or repetition. See that? So you will be given a card that asks you to describe something. They are topics that you should have some experience of or know something about. You may, for example, be asked to describe a person you know, a place you have been to, a passion you have. But there are many different topics, so you have to be prepared for any topic. On the card, there will also be 3 sub-points that you should cover when you are speaking. You have 1 minute to prepare what you are going to say, and you will be given a paper or pencil to make notes if you want to. So the part 2 basically is the time the test or question begin to increase in difficulties, because you are going to prepare things. So the part 2 is kind of a monologue. The examiner will just give you your cue card, and that cue card you are going to prepare yourself. Here is the example of the question. Describe the type of clothes you prefer to wear. In the sub question, you should say what the clothes look like, when you prefer to wear them, and where do you like to buy them. The final is explain why you like wearing these clothes. Now you look at these very carefully. It's not very difficult. So when they give you this card, you have 60 seconds to prepare for your answer. And after that, you're going to speak 1 to 2 minutes. So you have to prepare things. If not, you'll run out of words, or you should not speak more than 2 minutes. So after that, the next will be the part 3 of the test. The speaking part 3, I think, in my opinion, is the most difficult part of IELTS speaking. And the reason is the questions are very general, it's really broad. And also most of the time, the part 3 speaking test is based on the part 2. Let's say, for instance, if part 2, the examiner asks you to talk about your favorite teacher, in part 3, you are going to talk about education in your country. In part 2, if you were asked to talk about maybe your favorite food, in part 3, you could talk about nutrition or health in general. So in part 2, they can ask about every question, global warming. So student panic, because when you look at the part 3, some of the questions you are not familiar. But these is not very difficult, okay? But the tricky part is, if you look at the test, part 1 is dialogue. The examiner will ask you things and you answer. And then part 2 is monologue. It's just you and the cue card in front of you. Then part 3 is back to dialogue. But the part 3 conversation is a little bit deeper. They're expecting you to really showcase your English skills, where you be able to express yourself. Remember this, you're not an expert, so they are not expecting you to answer questions like a pro, or you have done a research and given a report. It's much more opinion based, so you express yourself as an opinion, which I could give you the best tip to able to answer them. So in the final part of the IELTS speaking test, the examiner will have a discussion with you about some issues that will be related to the topic that you talk about in part 2. So the questions in this part are more abstract nature, and so are more difficult than the questions in part 1 and 2. So if you look at these, let's look at some example here. Is buying clothes a popular activity for teenagers in your country? How much money should a parent spend on their children? Clothes. You see, if you haven't given birth before, how would you answer this? What type of fashion do teenagers like to wear in your country? And what influence has the fashion industry had in your country? Fashions of today different from those when you were, like your parents were young. And what do you think will be the effect of fashions industry in the next 10 years? If you look at these questions very closely, you could see that you may think perhaps you are not even fashionable, you don't follow fashions, so it's a little bit challenging. But you know what? With all what we have said today, if you really want to get the best score, the best way to answer part 1, part 2, part 3, you could click the link below and just contact me and let's talk about it. So this is the summary of the speaking test. It is divided into 2. It is 11 to 14 minutes long interview. The part 1 is 45 minutes which is introduction and question on familiar topics such as work, study, hobbies, and holidays. And part 2 is 3 to 4 minutes, a 2 minutes talk on a familiar topic. And part 3 is 4 to 5 minutes, two-way discussion on the issues related to the topic in part 2. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I will see you again in our next topic. Have a great day.